the UFC rankings. When somebody says those words, my initial reaction is to recoil and cringe, and I know that a lot of other people out there feel the same way. I personally have never met or seen someone that actually takes the rankings seriously, apart from actual UFC employees of course. Most UFC fans ignore them and enjoy the fights. However, today I'm going to stop taking the theoretical blue pill and release my pent-up disdain for the so-called rankings. So I'm going to open this by saying that I'm biased. I don't subscribe to the whole pound for pound shit, however that's a topic for another time. And right now I'm going to look at this shit. My first thought is, what are they basing the rankings off? It's a complete mess. Do they base it off performance, achievements, or overall mixed martial arts ability, mixed being the key word there? Maybe it's just based on who's better, like a power ranking sort of thing. One thing that's key to note on here is Jon Jones being on. Jon Jones being on the list is very interesting, because that means activity doesn't matter to qualify. So why isn't Cejudo on the list? He has re-entered the USADA testing pool and has been there for quite a while now, so why isn't he ranked on here? Realistically, he's probably ahead of Aljo. Also, does Jon Jones' failed drug tests matter for the integrity of the list? If not, then he's criminally underrated on here. Also, why is Volk first? Nothing against him being in that position, but what makes him better than Islam, for instance? Paddy Power has Islam as a 7-2 favourite, while if you bet £4 on Volk, you're set to get back 9. That doesn't really sound like he's the number one pound for pound. I realise there's a weight difference, however it's not a crazy difference, or at least to justify those odds. In my opinion, pound for pound should just be a fan thing that isn't actually official. I think media and all that lot can release it just fine, like some ESPN list, whatever. But having such an opinionated topic being official, I think it's very dumb. Technically, if you say Islam or Jon Jones is the best fighter walking on the planet today, you're wrong, because the UFC says so. Now we have the women's pound for pound. And to make this quicker, I'm going to say all the previous points for the men's still stand for the women's. For the women's though, I have just one question. Why? Why? This makes zero sense at all. With the men's, at least you could kind of delude yourself and say it makes sense a little bit. But this is just a complete and utter joke. How is Carla ranked third? Does anyone actually believe Carla is better than a Zhang or an Andrade? Hell, even a Holly Holm, no offense to Holly there. Also, why does it seem like after they put Holm on the list that they just can't think of anyone else, so they're just throwing names in at random? To wrap this up quickly, there just isn't enough women in the UFC to warrant a top 15 ranking system. And with Val and Nunes at the top, there is a complete and utter skill gap. And it kind of gives me the vibes of the women's featherweight division, where it holds no other purpose but to prop up Nunes or Val or whoever sits at top. Let's face it, it's only going to be those two. So I was going to start this off by introducing what it is, say and talk about it, like how I do. However, I'm not really feeling it at the moment, so I'm going to let somebody else introduce this one for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the reigning, defending, 155-pound champion of the UFC, the notorious Conor McGregor!
Thank you, Dana. Anyway, Conor is probably one of the most blatant examples of the circus that is the UFC rankings. I'm sure you all probably know about Conor's ranking controversies since he won the lightweight belt and then didn't defend it for about 350 days, something around that ballpark, until being stripped of the title. However, to keep this brief, I'm going to say my top 3 favourite Conor McGregor rankings moments for you all.
The reigning, defending, 155-pound champion of the UFC, the notorious Conor McGregor!
Thanks again, Dana. I'm actually feeling a lot more motivated to speak about this, so you didn't have to do that. However, I probably should have said in hindsight, but you didn't have to. Number 1. Conor McGregor moving up the rankings despite retiring. I realise some of you will probably say it wasn't a real retirement, and time has proved that. However, if you couple this with not winning in the weight class since 2016, and having all the money in the world, this seems like it should have been took pretty seriously to remove him from the rankings, and definitely not actually added him further up the rankings. I don't recall what happened back then, but I don't think that there's any reason that he should have been moved up. It's also funny to realise it is the most stacked division in the UFC.
From Dublin, Ireland, the reigning, defending 155-pound champion of the UFC, the notorious Conor McGregor!
The fuck, Dana? I told you I was gonna do the rest of them. Are you trying to punk me or something? Or do you just love the sound of your own voice that much? Sorry to everyone watching, that won't happen again. The third and final thing is Conor becoming the pound for pound number 1 back in 2020. This is more comical than the other ones, however it still shows just how low the UFC rankings will sink. I realise that they probably didn't see this as a long-term thing, but I doubt it was some computer error either. If you think about it, it could have been any fighter on the roster who this could have affected, but this glitch just happens to affect Conor McGregor, the poster child of the UFC. I doubt it. It's like if a bunch of doctors did a dick measuring contest, and then an error happens on the spreadsheet to put the one who's typing it up magically to first place with a 15-inch dick. I personally would doubt that was an accident. Yeah, I don't really know what doctors do in their spare time. However, I know they like stuffing a finger up your bum anytime you walk in, so yeah, I wouldn't rule this one out. No, Dana. We're done now. I finished the list. Why are you still here? It's done. You're just punking yourself at this point. Alright, I see there's no stopping you. Just get out of your system. Does that make you feel better? You're a big man now. Right, now fuck off. Alright, I've pulled this up. You can pause it and read it if you like. But I'm about done with the UFC rankings now. I'm getting to the bottom of this right here, right now. Who does them? How are they done? I've got to find something. I'm going to search high and low. I'm figuring out what the fuck the UFC rankings actually are. So, before I get into it, I just want to shout out this video. It's actually really good, well put together and extremely informative. So I'll be leaving it in the description.
The UFC ranking system is relatively new and first introduced in 2013. It plays some role when determining a fighter's next opponent, their place in the upcoming fight card, and a fighter's new contract terms. Before the system was implemented, it looked like that the UFC simply set the matchups. Still, the main criteria were to separate the fighters by their winning and losing streaks, their achievements and performance, and of course, their name value.
So, I'm going to take a look and speak about all three. The first point I agree with to an extent, however sadly the UFC disagrees. If you look at Stipe, he has won 3 fights of his last 5, losing his last fight decisively. He is ranked 2nd in the world. Pavlovich is on a 4-fight win streak, winning all 4 by first round KO. 2 of them were unranked, however. Also, his last loss was in 2018. With all that said, he is booked again fighting number 4 in the world, and that being against 3 ranked opponents he's fought in this year. Based on this criteria alone, he should be ahead of Stipe in the official UFC rankings. For the second point, fighters' performances should totally play a part in the rankings, no argument from me. However, adding achievements in there is where it could potentially get a little messy. Performance-wise, Pavlovich should be ranked higher, even with it being inferior competition to Stipe's. I personally don't think Stipe having 3 title defences and being a 2-time champ should put him ahead of Blades, Taito Ivasa or Pavlovich. Doing so kind of contradicts the first point. And then there's point 3. This one is the most stupid of them all, and is the only one that could have nothing to do with fighting and it affecting your ranking. For this we have to look at the bantamweight division, more specifically Sean O'Malley and Chito Vera. Marlon Chito Vera is on a 4-fight win streak with wins over Davy Grant, Frankie Edgar, who at the time was highly ranked and coming off a KO loss in a title eliminator, a win against Rob Font, who once again was a top 5 fighter at the time, and finally Dominic Cruz, who once again is highly ranked and a legend of the division for what that counts for. Sean is technically on a 1-fight win streak, however if you're flexible like myself, you'll disregard that and still count him on a 4-fight win streak. And he started that off with a win against Thomas Almeida, who at the time was on a 3-fight losing streak. He then fought Chris Moutinho, who was making his UFC debut at the time, a win against Paiva, who was on a 3-fight win streak against fellow non-ranked opponents. And finally, a win against former champion and highly ranked PT Yarn. I do have to say though, it was a split decision and was considered a robbery, and I would say that as well. And I also have to inform you that before this win streak, as you can see, he had a loss to Chito that was inside of the last 4 years. With that said, you may be surprised to find out that Sean O'Malley is the #1 contender in the world and Chito is down at 4th. The only reason for Sean to be ahead of Chito is marketability, so the previous 2 points have been held back behind this one. Thanks UFC.
You rock!
Who decides the fighter's ranking? The panel consists of 22 media members who set the ranking after each event. Originally, there were 14 members. UFC did handle recruiting directly and via an application form on their website. From the moment of the rankings implementation in 2013, questions and controversies around it are raised. Whether the members have the necessary qualifications for voting, what is the level of transparency, and if UFC influence the voting process.
So, to touch on the media panel concerns, first, are they qualified? I made an attempt to find this out. On the UFC website, it shows a list of the outlets that decide the rankings. So, like anyone, I picked one at random and googled it. The Google search took me to a YouTube channel with 5 videos and 14 subscribers. Determined to find out more, I looked for links in the About section and found a website link. Sadly, going on that link led to me being offered the domain for the website. In my final last-ditch effort to finding out who creates these god-awful rankings, I followed another website link and found a website that looked like it just time-travelled from 2008. So, in an attempt to answer this question, I'm going to say no, they are not qualified because I think they gave me a fucking virus. Second, is the process transparent? No. Finally, are they influenced by the UFC? Well, there's not any true evidence for it, but the answer is yes. The fact that marketability is an actual criteria for judging the fighter's ranking, and seems to be the most important out of it, it's just about proof in itself. No fans that have a normal brain watch the fights thinking about marketability and saying, oh my god, if Sean wins, maybe his Sugar Show GTA shirt might sell out. Or, oh, if Islam wins this fight, they need to do the Welcome to the Makachev era t-shirt. The only people that gain from marketability is the UFC themselves. And I refuse to admit the average UFC fan is sat down watching the fights with their daddest man on the planet t-shirt, or the Rose I'm the best t-shirt. with their £290 UFC boombox playing in the background, wearing a £100 bracelet, wrapped up in a £650 UFC replica belt, taking a sip from a Conor McGregor stainless steel bottle with their UFC toys surrounding the room, all whilst cuddling a £65 Hezbollah body pillow. What the bloody hell am I supposed to be speaking about again? Oh yeah, do the UFC influence the rankings? Apart from Conor managing to leap up the rankings whenever he's booked a fight, so it sounds good and respectable when Bruce announces it, and Stipe magically staying second to justify him and Jones being for the interim title, then probably still yes. Even though the video that we just watched gives some solutions, and if you want to find those out you're probably going to have to watch it, I'm not too satisfied with those solutions personally, so I've came up with my own that in theory could work right now. Are you ready? I'm in charge of the rankings. That's right, what I say goes. It's actually perfect when you think about it. An authoritarian dickwad that you know has zero clue on the spot, instead of many dickwads that are all conniving with one another, and you don't even know who the fuck they are. But to be fair, my rankings are definitely a lot better than the UFC's. So I base my rankings on the level of the opponent faced, recent fights, probably around the 4 years at the latest, activity, winning streak, performance, and ranking of the other opponent. So, if everyone in the world right now recognises my rankings as the true and honest, then the UFC will have no choice but to hire me and pay me a lot of money. Okay, I'm coming in with an emergency development. First of all, I'm going to say, in the future I'll probably show you more of the rankings, but yeah, the emergency, the update that I've got to give you is that in the making of this video, Pereira just took over Esparza in the women's pound for pound rankings. I thought the women's pound for pound rankings was at its peak of making just no sense. It wasn't going to make any less sense, but God, we've gone and done it. So what's happened in the past few days of making this video that has warranted Pereira to suddenly be declared better than Esparza? Why the sudden realisation? Is it because she was on that ESPN panel for Rodriguez Lemos? Does that count as marketability or achievements for them? Because up until then, she wasn't considered better than Esparza. Also on Esparza, how come she is ranked ahead of Zhang Weili? I checked today to see if I could put a nice little bet on Weili, and what do I see? Weili is a huge favourite. How can 4th pound for pound in the world, which apparently she's just moved down to, be such a big underdog against someone who's lower down on the list? I understand at least with the Volk and Islam thing where there's a bit of a weight difference there. I get that, but there's no weight difference. They're the same weight class. The UFC say Esparza's better, but nobody believes that. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I hope you enjoyed this, and maybe there'll be more to come soon. Alright, bye. See you later, suckers.